Don't leave while you're confused. Don't feel pressure to leave when you do not have a plan. The working the plan is the most important part, not the actual plan. So start working the plan.
Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Aquart. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. Today, we have an incredible guest, someone who has been a huge inspiration to me and many others. If you've ever thought about turning your side hustle into a full-time business or creating your own opportunities, this episode is for you. We'll be talking about the journey from corporate life to entrepreneurship and how to build a platform that empowers others. I'm excited to introduce you to Nicaila Matthews Okome, the host of the Side Hustle Pro podcast. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Nicaila Matthews Okome, a dynamic entrepreneur and podcast host who has been blazing trails in the world of side hustles and entrepreneurship. Nicaila is the creator and host of the Side Hustle Pro podcast, the first and only podcast to spotlight bold Black women entrepreneurs who have scaled their side hustles into profitable businesses. Her podcast has amassed over 10 million downloads, has been featured on the Today Show, and earned her a place in the 2022 Podcast Hall of Fame. She's also the founder and CEO of Side Hustle Pro LLC and the mind behind Podcast Moguls, which is a podcast accelerator program. Now, Nicaila's work is empowering entrepreneurs worldwide. And I'm really excited, you have no idea, to have her here today to share her story and insights with all of you. So Nicaila, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing so well. I'm just a proud friend over here, just listening to your intro. I mean, you just have the podcast voice and you're just doing so well. I'm just a proud friend and just happy to be here.
I love it. And I got to give you all some background. So Nicaila and I go way, way, way back, right? And so back in the day where there's a program called MLT, they used to call it the CP and JP program. That's how old we go back, right? But,
my gosh,
it's been a while, and I have been following Nicaila's journey for some time. Back when you had Nicaila Speaks, right? And all those
Nicaila
things.
K Speaks,
yes.
the blog.
Man, I loved it. And just really been one of my inspirations for the show. And so with that kind of background, I would love for you to share with the audience just a bit about your upbringing and how it shaped your entrepreneurial spirit.
Of course. And it's almost like, where do I begin, right? So you mentioned MLT, and that program that came about when we were in college. Prior to that, I was born in Jamaica, grew up in the Bronx, and growing up in the Bronx and coming from Jamaica, my parents were very much education focused. We came here to do our best, to learn. And so I always knew that I was going to college. Like, I was trying to get into the best programs. I went to Bronx Science, which is a specialized high school in New York, and getting into Bronx Science involved me going to a specialized program, just to take the test and do well on the test. So that was from a very early age. I understood that the playing field was not even, and that definitely shaped who I am as an individual, as a person, just seeing that from an early age, the resources and the schooling that I grew up with in the Bronx prior to getting into Bronx Science, a specialized public school. The resources were so different. And so it wasn't because kids were less smart that they were in different places. It was simply because of the economic setup, the disenfranchisement and all of that. So knowing that, I just always wanted to seek out opportunities to do my best and to earn money and to always be able to put my family in a better environment once I grew up, so to speak. I pursued communications. In college, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, pursued communications. That's what brought me to MLT. I learned about the program from my older sister, actually. And I said, all right, why not? And that was the program that exposed me to environments like I worked at an ad agency, Ogilvy. I worked at MTV Networks, and coming out of undergrad, worked at MTV Networks. And I was really trying to find my place in the world. I knew that I loved media and communications, but I never truly understood where inside of corporate I fit, where my interests fit. So after years of different roles in marketing and PR, I ended up deciding to go back to business school to get my MBA from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Went to Michigan, had an amazing time, just one of the signature experiences of my life, and interned for Google while I was there. Thought I was going to get the full-time role, ended up not getting a full-time offer. And therein began the journey that many people know me for today, which is Side Hustle Pro, because that's when I truly started side hustling.
Oh, I love that. What were some of those key milestones in your career journey that led you to pursue even like digital marketing and media before you even launched your own brand? Because you had to have some type of, well, hopefully, well, maybe you had some background before
Yeah.
you really got into this space.
You know, from an early age, I loved TV, and even though I still am an introverted person. Like I recoup my energy from being at home. I loved TV, and I was fascinated by how it was made and how people became the people who were reporting the news. So initially I thought, all right, I want to be a journalist. I want to go to journalism school. And then that's when I really started pursuing media. When I was 16, I was invited to HBO headquarters at the time, downtown in Manhattan, 42nd and 6th. I'll never forget it. And even being 16 years old, I'd never had a job before. Something about being in the environment and being so excited gave me the courage to just ask an employee there, do you have internships? And she was like, yeah, we do. Send an email to this person. And I ended up, asking my sisters for help, putting together a really basic resume that was like, I worked at the school store and, this and that. And then I ended up getting my first internship. So that was really, I think, the pivotal moment that set it off, like that I want to work in entertainment. And I wasn't even in a entertainment office per se. I started out in HR. That was my first internship at HBO.
Okay.
But I interned there for like 5 summers straight at HBO. So I got to see many different departments, and it just further cemented for me that I love this space of media, and I want to do something here. So that influenced me majoring in communications in college.
Like that. So let's talk about this big career decision. One of
Yeah.
the things I love about your story, you've shared receiving this "we need to talk" email from your boss back in 2017. And
Yep, yep.
so what was going through your mind at that moment, and how did it spark the decision to take control of your career?
Yes. The "we need to talk" email came when I'd gotten a new boss. So this was when I was at NPR, National Public Radio. And I started that role being very forthcoming about the fact I had a side hustle. At the time, it was my blog, Kayla K Speaks. I had just recently started rebranding to Side Hustle Pro, and I put it on my resume because the whole point of me ever starting the blog after I graduated business school was to get a job. I wanted to show that I'm this marketing pro and, hire me to do your digital marketing. So that was my initial intent. But as I started doing it even more, I started to lean into other interests. Now, when this boss came on, I was a year into my role at NPR. I was side hustling, but also working full time, killing it at my role. And so she came on, and you know how sometimes people just, I don't know if I don't know. In corporate how there are people who come in and they value your expertise, they value your work. And then there are just some people who come in and they just doubt you from day one.
Oh,
And
yes.
you just had
Yes.
that sense, like this person just had this skeptical gaze of me for whatever reason. I don't know if it was the feeling of being threatened by another woman. I had a male boss before, then I had a female boss. And, she just came in with a bit of doubt around me. And so then I got the "we need to talk" email, and you just know when you're like, oh boy, what is this about? So I go into her office, and of course, some hater had slipped her some, by the way, Nicaila's doing this, maybe showed her screenshots. I feel like she had printed stuff out. I feel like, she had I don't know why. They act like I was doing criminal activity, like I had a drug business on the side. Anyway, And she was just like, I just learned about this and it feels like this is where your passion is. And it just really caught me off guard because of the fact that I went into this role so transparently about what I have going on the side. And it was always viewed as an asset by my prior boss. So it completely blindsided me, which in hindsight, you should never be blindsided by that because corporate America is filled with people who want to look for any reason to doubt your commitment and loyalty to the company. And it's such a short-sighted view. More and more companies are learning to embrace the multi-hyphenate, the hybrid employee, but it's going to take a while for employers to truly accept that you don't own employees. They have other interests outside of work and they are allowed to do other things outside of work, especially if you're not paying all their bills.
Right. Right. No, I hear you. And that's a lot of that resonates with me, but yes. So I definitely understand, and now, so like leaving a stable job to bet on yourself is obviously a huge decision. And eventually you did make this leap. What, yeah, what were the biggest fears or challenges you faced in that transition and how did you overcome that?
Yes. Deciding to leave was not a decision that I took lightly whatsoever. It was a year in the making. I launched my Side Hustle Pro podcast in June 2016. And that whole summer, I went hard with promoting it. And I was going around DC to conferences with my t-shirt with the logo on it. And the reception right away, like it came out the gate in the top charts in business and marketing. So I knew I was interested in this topic, which were, Black women entrepreneurs who started as side hustlers and grew viable businesses into full-time profitable businesses. I knew I was interested in that, but the reception confirmed to me that other people were interested in it. And I didn't just know I was interested in it. I did some research in advance to confirm like who my listener would be, what they really wanted. Like my approach to podcasting was very strategic. So I knew that the interest was there. I knew about my listener and then the reception confirmed all of that work. And so very early on, I would say within the first 3 months, I knew, okay, I'm going to take this seriously because if I take this seriously, this could lead to something. It could lead to side income or it could lead me to my future business idea. That's what I was thinking in the early days. Then as I started to explore and learn even more about podcast monetization, then started to actually go out there and pitch my show to sponsors and start to earn money and revenue on the show, then I just devised a plan. Then I said, okay, if it took me this much effort to get one sponsor, here's how much effort I will need. And here's how many sponsors I'll need. Oh, and I need another revenue stream just in case, sponsorship lags at times. And so I went after cementing the revenue streams, cementing how much I would need, and also saving as much as I could. So that was my plan in the early days. And I worked that plan for about a year and a half. So launched in June 2016 and left NPR in December 2017. And so my plan wasn't just, oh, my boss and I aren't vibing, that we need to talk meeting. It was scary. And, she said, I need to check with HR to make sure everything is okay with what you're doing. And sure enough, she brought in HR and I was able to present to them that, hey, here are the conversations that I had with my boss. Here's the resume that I applied to NPR with where it states my side hustle, right? So all of these elements showed that I was always transparent, as well as the employee handbook showed that I wasn't violating any policies. So I also made sure that I referenced the employee handbook in everything that I did. If I worked on my lunch hour, I went away from work. I didn't work inside of NPR, right? So I was very, very careful. And also I didn't let emotion drive the decision, but I let strategy, saving, and planning drive the decision. And I'm big on make the plan and work the plan.
Yeah, no, I love that. In that time frame, obviously a lot of lessons learned
Yeah.
leaving corporate life, launching this.
Yeah.
How has it shaped your approach to business and leadership?
Ooh, now that is a phenomenal question. Well, I would say it shaped my approach to business because So there are two things. I want to break this down. Okay. So when it comes to business, it shaped how I approach the finances of business a lot. People often, especially MBA students, they like to brag, like, I own the P&L. I'm an entrepreneur inside the business. They love selling you those lines, like to make you happy to work for the company. Well, here, guess what? You don't truly own a business until you own a business. All right. There's nothing like having to spend your own money. When you can spend another company's money on marketing, you don't own a business yet. All right. When you have to decide, all right, am I going to spend this dollar on this service or am I going to hold on to that right now? That's when you really are in the mindset of an entrepreneur and a business owner. So it taught me to think like it is my own money at all times. I mean, I was already doing that, but when you actually start to eat what you kill, it changes things. And then as far as leadership, I have been, like I mentioned before, working in corporate, not just interning, but working in corporate landscape since I was 16 years old. So I have over 15 years of experience now with corporate dynamics, microaggressions, all these other things. And it's shaped my approach to leadership because I am overly caring. I care about people first and not so much, almost to a fault, but I do care about people first. If something's lagging and I haven't received something from someone I have a small like contractor based team, but if something's lagging first, my first thought is, wait, is this person sick? Did something happen with their son? Because I know to expect them to be on point. I expect them to be on point. And if they're not on point, my first instinct is what is going on in their life. I know for sure that wasn't the experience and the grace that I was given in corporate America. And especially now that I'm a mom of two and, I work with moms, I know what's going on. And so I just have that lens in leading with people. And I can't unsee that and just talk to people like they're deliverables because that's not all they are.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. So starting this in 16, you were really on like the precipice of this whole podcast. Like podcasts have been around for a while, but
Yeah,
like
they've been around.
you've been, I would say, an early adopter in this space. It's only because I would imagine I've been around. This is my like third, fourth year.
Yeah.
And so I'm relatively new to the game. And so, but you've built this great platform of community and listeners. What has been the most rewarding and maybe even the most challenging part of your content creation journey? Because social media has changed quite a bit
Oh,
since
yeah.
2016.
Yeah. The most rewarding part is just hands down when people reach out and say, you have impacted me so much. Just the other day, an entrepreneur that I've admired, and actually I bought these earrings from. Shout out to Tiffany. I didn't know she listened to the show. And she shared my latest episode, one of my latest called Why I Lost My Mojo, because I've been sharing solo episodes about the season in my life transparently, the expansion era I'm on. And she shared how much that episode resonated with her. And I was like, wait, you listen to I bought something from you. So we were just laughing in the DMs. I never get tired of that. I never get tired of people sharing and helping me know, because when you're a podcaster, you do a lot of this alone in your house. And although someone's listening because you can see the downloads, it still hits different when you meet the person, when you hear from the person. So
Yeah.
that is my favorite part. It never gets old.
What's been the most challenging part of content creation?
The most challenging part of content creation is the fact that it's very much tied, revenue in content creation is so much tied to economic shifts. And so a lot of us content creators have been going through it the last couple of years as the shifts in the economy have had ebbs and flows, and how brands want to partner and how they want to spend their budget. And it's just really brought me back to my roots, though, of always making sure that I had something of my own so I wouldn't be overly reliant on sponsors. And I got too comfortable for a little bit. I was skating a little bit.
Hey, that's
And
self-aware.
I had to, get myself back in that zone, the startup Nicaila zone of, okay, wait a second. I built my own product, and I built my own coaching practice, and I've been putting that on the back burner because I was prioritizing other partnerships and brands. But now I need to remember that both of these are important elements of my business. So that's been the most challenging part, just managing the dance of the economy, the revenue shifts, and making sure that I have stability in my business by doing the other revenue stream, which is my coaching and course practice, to make sure that I'm never overly reliant on sponsors again.
Makes a lot of sense. But let's talk about Side Hustle Pro now,
Hmm.
the birth of it. So what
Yeah.
inspired you to create it? Why did you decide to specifically focus on spotlighting Black women entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I decided to create it when, like I said, I initially started the blog, Kayla K Speaks, and I was like, I need a job. So I'm going to write about marketing trends in media and highlight what a thought leader I am and an analytical thinker I am about marketing. And I was bored to tears by my own blog. I said, all right, I don't like this. I want to interview some folks. So at first I started interviewing marketers. Again, also trying to network, get a job.
Hmm.
Like some of my first few interviews were people who work for companies I want to work for. And then as I started really leaning into just doing something that brought me joy, I realized I was gravitating to stories of interviewing people who were side hustlers, who were phenomenal at their job, had amazing roles, but also were building really amazing, viable businesses on the side. For some reason, that just really lit a fire in me. And I think it's because I had gone to business school and I had all these opportunities to do entrepreneurial things. I had so many opportunities to do case studies, and business school is like a playground. They literally throw money at you to go make up stuff and like build fake businesses and
Love
then
it.
pitch it and win money. It is make believe land and you can make so much money. However, I shied away from all of that because in my mind, the identity of an entrepreneur was not me. I wasted so much of that opportunity because I did not see myself in that identity. And so why did I not see myself in that identity? Because the identity that was sold to me of an entrepreneur was a white man who moved to Silicon Valley to live with his bros and start a tech startup. Like that was entrepreneurship to me. And it was only after graduating that I started to unpack that. And I was like, well, if I could see more stories of people who went about entrepreneurship in a more realistic way to me, which is still having a job because you need money, then I would be able to understand my pathway to entrepreneurship. And that's what my inspiration was. And that's why I decided to do it, because I couldn't find those stories. So I decided to tell them myself.
Love that. And for those who are maybe new listeners, what can they expect from the Side Hustle Pro podcast? And truly, how has it evolved since its inception?
Yeah. So Side Hustle Pro, in its inception, it was about women who have started businesses on the side, some of them who are still side hustling and growing businesses, and just showing how to do that juggle, showing the startup steps that you can do to start your own business, and showing you that you can achieve it one step at a time. It was to really show you how to start small and get going wherever you are, no matter who you are. And as it's evolved, this season of Side Hustle Pro is going to also, oh, and in the beginning, I also shared my journey as a side hustler with my podcast, setting up my LLC, setting up my bank account. I brought listeners along on that whole journey. And now, in this new season of Side Hustle Pro, I want to take you on two journeys. Number one is the expansion era journey, the journey of me getting back to myself, expanding Side Hustle Pro after, a few years of just uncertainty, self-doubt, shifting confidence, the realities of motherhood and postpartum depression and the effects it had on me. So coming back into myself. And then for the entrepreneurs I want to talk to this season, it's all about how everyone is managing the pivot. As a business owner, you start out and you have one journey. And then no matter what, at some point, you are going to hit some kind of challenge. So how do you bounce back from that? How do you get around that boulder? That's what we're talking about this season.
Love that. What's a memorable either moment or quote from the show that's really stuck with you, and why did it resonate?
This one will always stick with me. It's from Kim Lewis of the Curl Mix brand. She said on her show way back in like 2016, 2017, if you can't run a side hustle, you can't run a business. And that really resonated with me because everyone who's like, oh, I don't have the time, I can't do it. Well, if you can't do it now, you definitely can't do it once you're full time because the hours don't stop and the juggling and the challenges don't stop. So get used to it now because the practice of running a side hustle, it truly is training ground for being a business owner.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, I would love to talk a little bit about advice for those who may be interested in this. We have
Yeah.
a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs who may be listening
Yes.
to this show. So you've helped a lot of people turn their side hustles into full-time businesses. What advice do you have for someone thinking about taking the leap, but maybe they're afraid to leave their 9 to 5, essentially that comfort?
Yeah. The advice I have for them is don't leave while you're confused. Don't feel pressure to leave when you do not have a plan. Let's figure out your exit plan first. And so your exit plan is going to involve you doing some rounds of testing of what your side hustle could be, what's going to be a viable revenue stream for you or two revenue streams for you at least. What's your savings goal, right? So you have some financial runway after you've left. The exit plan is so, so important. And it doesn't have to be a 90-page deep plan because one of my recent favorite quotes that I've heard, I don't know who said it, but it is, you don't learn to swim by reading about water. So the point of the plan is not to sit there and feel good like, ooh, I got the plan. It is to center yourself in, okay, here are my next steps. Let's assign some dates to them and let's start working the plan. The work in the plan is the most important part, not the actual plan. So start working the plan, assess how it's going, what's working, and then you will know when it's time to leave once you are in motion and you have traction and you have things going for you. But if you're still in that space of feeling confused, your next step is to figure out your plan. And then the step after that is to work the plan.
And you also talk a lot about building the create your own opportunities muscle, right?
Oh, yes. Yes,
And
I do. I love
yeah,
that
oh, I
muscle.
know. Look, hey, look, I did my deep dive on you, Nicaila.
I know.
I follow your work.
I'm like,
Okay.
you like reminded me of stuff I said. I'm like, oh yeah, I did say that. When
Oh
did I say
yeah.
that again?
Yes. So when you think about this
Yeah.
creating your own opportunities, what are the first steps someone should take to start creating those opportunities for themselves?
The first step is a skill assessment. Really, there's a Venn diagram that's going to exist between what you can do, what you enjoy doing, and then that overlap space are some of the potential create your own opportunity options. Okay. So if you enjoy cooking, or if you can cook, but you don't enjoy doing it for other people, it's not going to go in that middle space, right? If you enjoy taking photos, but you don't want to do it for other people, it's not going to go in that middle section. However, if you enjoy coaching people on something and people ask you for that, that's going to go in that middle section. That's going to be one thing that we can start to identify as, all right, is there a coaching practice that I can start? If there's something that you create that you could sell, that you enjoy making for people, and you wouldn't mind if you have to work on bulk orders late into the night sometimes, then that's going to go into the middle section. So that's really that first create your own opportunities set, is to take stock of all of your potential things that you could do for money. To keep
Now,
it simple.
I know, and I love that, and keeping it simple, I think is so important for folks
Yes.
because I've even fallen into this.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about like a 90 page plan or something like that. I remember when I first started the show, I was like, oh, do I need a business plan for this? Starting a podcast and all this other stuff. Do I need to do that? And at some point, I was like, man, just turn on the mic.
Right.
You know,
You gotta turn on the
just
mic.
turn on the mic. Like, we'll figure this out, but
Right.
just turn on the mic, my man. So I eventually had to get out of my own way at some point to launch this. Looking forward, you talk about the new season now, the new season of Side Hustle Pro, the expansion era, as you referred to it. So what type of impact are you hoping to have in this future of the show, yourself, this expansion era?
Who the impact I'm hoping to have and always hope to have is to make someone feel seen, to make someone feel less alone, and to know that you're not the only one going through things, whether it is um, questioning your identity because of the shifts that have happened in your life, your career, or whether it is doubting if you are qualified to be a business owner anymore because of the shifts that have happened in your business. This season is going to be your vitamin to get back on track and just remember who you are and get back into yourself and just be reminded that none of us are in this alone. Anything that you've gone through in isolation, somebody else is going through, and it's time we all start talking about it.
That really hits with the show, and that's a lot of the feedback I get with the show too. And one of my whys for putting this type of content out there. Now, would love to flip the mic to the real pro here. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
what's one question you have for me that I could answer?
My question is, knowing what you know now, having been podcasting for a while, knowing what you know now, what would you tell an aspiring podcaster who's probably in their head? In addition to turning on the mic, I'm curious what benefit and what reward has it unpacked for you that just makes it all worth it? Like, what would you tell someone about podcasting that you didn't know, but you now know? Hope that wasn't too convoluted.
I think that's a great question, and I'm actually reminded of a quote that I had from a guest that has really stuck with me and that put a lot of my journey into perspective. But I had a woman, Rachel B. Lee, who was a marketer and who was sharing things around that if you're essentially robbing the world of your voice if you don't put it out there. And it hit me. I made her say it twice because I was just like, oh, that resonates, right? And so the reason I say that is because as you were talking about earlier, when you're I work in healthcare day to day, nonprofit, but let's just call it corporate for
Yeah.
make it easy.
I know. I call NPR corporate just to make it.
Yeah. There's a lot of creative juices that flow within me, right? That I can't necessarily get out in my day to day work. And I love what I do day to day, genuinely, like some of the work I do and I love, but also recognize there are limitations and it's no fault of the org. What's the word you said? He's a multi-hyphenate, right?
Yep.
I'm one of those people, right? I have, different things, different outlets, creative outlets I like to explore. And this has been one of them for me. I, as you can imagine, am not an introvert, right? And so
Yeah.
so I like to get out there. Conversations like this really give me a lot of joy, a lot of energy, and very similar to you around, making sure people don't feel alone in their entrepreneurship journey. My piece around not feeling alone is in your resignation journey, because there are so many folks. Everyone's left a job. Very
Yeah.
rare are you right out of high school or even college. I'm working in this one job forever.
Right.
Doesn't happen anymore. We've all had these conversations. We've all had these internal conversations. And so my goal has been to ensure that people don't feel alone in that process. To someone who is just maybe hemming and hawing, what's funny, I just sent a text actually before this to one of my friends who has got grant money to start his own show.
What?
And he's like, I can't just get out my own way. And so,
Give me that grant. Where you get that grant from? Give it to me.
So I was telling him, I was like, so what I've told him and what would tell others is like, you know what? Don't rob the world of your voice. Don't rob the world of your voice. And I think about what Rachel B. Lee said, and she was so right. And so for people who are out there, they want to do something, they feel like they have a topic. And this actually wasn't my first podcast idea. I had to flesh a few out before you kind of get to the one.
Right.
But don't rob, just go for it. And then eventually you got to turn on the mic.
Yep. All good reminders. You're so everything, all about that. I relate to all of that.
Yes. Well, look, Nicaila, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on this show. As I kind of alluded to in the beginning, this means a lot to me, especially as we're here in this milestone season, right? I got a lot of things happening in season 5. And I'm just excited to see and have continued to watch your growth and your show. Keep teaching the masses. I love the stuff you're putting out there, and would love for you to share an opportunity where our listeners can find you and support some of the work that you're doing.
Yes. So if you're listening to this and you have a message on your heart, I invite you to lean into that. Listen to everything Brian and I have talked about today, and you should explore starting the podcast. That could be your exit plan. I teach a free live class all about how to get started. So you can find it at sidehustlepro.co/free training. We'll put the link in the description and the show notes everywhere. And you can find me everywhere at Side Hustle Pro if you'd like to chat more. I'm just so passionate about helping people to unlock what's inside of them. So come on over.
Well, thank you for that info. And look, that'll do it for today's
That'll
episode.
do it.
I know that'll do. I mean, this was good. I'm like,
This
I'm
was
I'm
fun.
like fanboying over here a little bit.
What?
You
I'm ready to like cut the clips myself. I'm like,
dropping gems. But look, I just want to thank our guest, Nicaila Matthews Okome, for joining the show today. As she mentioned, all this information will be in the show notes. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll definitely see you next time. Nicaila, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co.